Okay, so I think it's Yuki versus Benji. Biggels versus what, AimieW? What is that? I don't know. Anyway, AimieW in the top left as Terran, and Biggels in the bottom right also as Terran. Death Aura, very popular. I don't. Maybe Ryan told people to play Death Aura or something. I don't really know. Anyway. So Biggels opening with supply depot at the top of the ramp, a very normal thing to do as Terran. If you're going to play Terran, that's weird. But this is absolutely normal. Normally, start of the game, you build a worker, and pretty standard fare is to rally that first worker to the top of the ramp. By the time it's built and gets there, you've got enough minerals to build a depot. Not sure about the gas here. Don't know why we've got gas being built before there's even a barracks. But anyway, next step, you would build the racks normally to complete a wall. Not complete, sorry, but up against your supply depot to leave just a single hex gap, and then later you can plug that with a second supply depot to have a wall. Biggels going for the 2 depots first, which is a bit unnecessary. This slightly later gas timing is a bit more normal. Personally, as Terran, I generally don't bother with an early gas. If I was playing 1v1 on ladder, I probably would. I'd throw down the gas just before the barracks, so that when the barracks finishes up, I've got enough gas to build a Reaper just to scout. But I don't think either of these players are going to be doing that, so I'm not really sure what this early gas is about, especially when you've only put 1 worker in this one. It's hard to see the value in that. The SCV is going to come in and actually get a look around. That is an awesome delayed reaction, isn't it? This SCV gets in, has a proper old look around, sees all there is to see. Biggels kindly lowering the depot to allow it back out again, presumably. I don't really know what's happening there. He's going to poke it with, rather than shoot it with the Marines, he's going to poke it with an SCV. But I think it's numbers up. Yep, good. So Aimie then has got full vision of what's inside his opponent's base. Biggels yet to do any scouting. So the command center on the low ground, pretty normal enough timing for that. You've got a couple of Marines out, you're feeling pretty good. On the other side of the map, it's a very normal looking setup, really. We've got the tech lab on the barracks, we've got a factory in production, we've got the expo building. What I would like to see is an orbital command here, and that goes for both these players. As just standard as Terran, as soon as you've got your command center, as soon as you've got your barracks finished up, you turn your command center into an orbital. That's just pretty normal fare. We can see that Yuki is researching combat shield here, and that is absolutely normal again. Combat shield makes a lot of difference to Marines. They've only got 45 health. Combat shield gives them an extra 10, so really does make a big difference to how well they're going to perform in any sort of fight. So the expo timings for these 2 players actually remarkably similar. They're both going to finish up at about the same time. If we have a quick look, army supply very similar, worker supply mildly in favor of Biggels, not drastically, but certainly in favor of Biggels. Tech wise, the combat shield actually is a big factor, and the factory is cranking out siege tanks, whereas the factory yet to finish for Biggels. So it's Aimie that has the slight tech advantage at this stage. Another barracks in production as well. So this build for Aimie looking actually pretty reasonable. Here we are at 4 minutes. We've got the orbital, we've got the natural up. The tech lab has researched combat shield. There's a siege tank on the map. We've got additional barracks coming down. This looks to be a pretty reasonable setup to sort of do any sort of 2-base push, or simply get yourself set up on 2 bases and secure a tech path with a strong defensive setup. The scan isn't bad, sees most of what there is to see, doesn't see these units out the front, so it doesn't get a handle on that, but certainly sees what tech there is inside the men. So Starport is going to give a significant advantage to Biggels at this stage, but look, his combat shield is really, really far behind. So it would take several medevacs before that would make up for the lack of combat shield. Combat shield and +1 armor, though, is coming out for Biggels. So both of these players are actually looking to be in reasonably good shape at this early stage in the game, but we're still only 5 minutes in. Okay. Sorry, just supping a cup of tea. Right, siege tanks then coming out for Biggels as well, and look, we've got medevacs in production. So, you know, what we don't really see enough of in the EMS tournament is drops. Drop play is a really effective way to just slow your opponent down and pick them apart. And drops are relatively easy to set up and run. What you do is you just load a bunch of stuff into a medevac, shift click it around the map and unload it here. So, you know, a medevac with 8 Marines in it unloads here. The Marines kill a bunch of workers. What I would encourage you to do if you are trying to do an effective drop or whatever, the thing to avoid is spending all of your time watching it, as tempting as that is, because you know then you're not macroing while your opponent is, and whatever damage you do is kind of undone by the fact that they're continuing to build stuff and you haven't been. So Amy's got a pretty good defensive setup here. These 2 siege tanks in the bunker, I would not like to be the Marine that tries to walk into this. Oh dear. Yeah. As I was saying, I would not like to be the Marine to try and walk into that. So, you know, given that the medevac was there, Biggels would have been much better off picking his units up and just elevatoring them into this area. What he could have done, you know, get the siege tank in there, go back for the next set of Marines, and as you're flying in with the Marines, siege up the siege tank, and then it's really hard actually for your opponent to come and get you, because they've got to file their Marines in single file past their own buildings into siege tank fire, and that's horrible. And so that was a bad hurt got put on Biggels there, a bad hurt indeed. Good news for both these players is look how busy they both are. The production tab is looking healthy for both these players. Neither of them are sitting back doing nothing, so I really like to see that. Biggels just needs to get on top of his workers as well. You know, there aren't workers being built. There's no reason to stop until, you know, you don't stop building workers maybe until you certainly have 3 saturated bases. And these, we do have a couple of sort of idle buildings, but, you know, I'm not over concerned. This is of interest. Biggels going for cloak for Banshees here. I'd like to actually see some Banshees in production to go along with that, but presumably we will shortly. Cloaked Banshees can be really, really effective units. I think last year we saw Chaitin get a lot done with Cloaked Banshees, so that can be good. This push coming across the map is scary. The army supply is massively in favour of Amy, so this and the siege tank look not, does not get sieged up. Is stim done? It is done. So you know, the way you can manage this, with 3 sieged up siege tanks, that is not a pleasant thing to try and push into. But while these aren't sieged up, you can stim in and you can shoot them down. But we'll see how this goes. We'll see whether Amy is planning just the full frontal assault, or whether he's looking to lift up and drop. What I'd like to see is a scan. You know, before you walk up a ramp blind, just scan ahead. So, you know, 4 siege tanks here. You don't want to walk into this. This is just going to be painful. This is going to be a reversal of what we saw last time, essentially. So these siege tanks do manage to get sieged up, and foolishly these Marines step forward into them. So Amy's going to back it up. With both sides basically losing their Marine force. You know, this many siege tanks, like just one-shot Marines is the problem. So even with the medevac support, your Marines just die too quickly. You can't really push into, you know, TVT has always kind of been famous for that. Sieged up positions cannot be pushed into in an easy way. This Banshee's got cloak available to it, and I'd love to see it on the other side of the map killing stuff, not just hanging out at home. So Amy's going to have a bit of a rethink about how to approach this with the medevacs. The obvious thing to do is, as I said previously, the Biggels could have done. You've got 4 medevacs. You can get a lot of units in there. You could get, for example, with 4 medevacs, you could get either 16 Marines and 4 siege tanks or something like that up into this corner, and that then you're the person in the entrenched position with your siege tanks sieged up, and it's just really hard then for your opponent not to lose a large amount of the inside of their base. Okay, so things are going to quiet down a little, certainly for the time being. Biggels floating quite a lot of minerals here, so it needs to think about getting some more production on the go. Look, nothing building. Earlier the production tab was so healthy, and now it's just kind of stalled. Oh, that's because he's busy staring at this Cloak Banshee that I've completely missed. So Aimie needs to do something about this, otherwise it is going to kill all of his units. So he's sending some workers in. The common mistake people make here, the siege tank isn't going to help you at all. Commonly people scan the Banshee before the units get there, and by the time the units get there, the scan is gone. So the key is to get your Marines into position to kill it and then drop the scan so that you can see it. So finally we see some production happening on Biggles' side of the map, but not that much. These barracks have been idle for a long time, and I don't really see a good reason. I think he's hoping for some sort of Hail Mary nuke to save the day here. Are there actually ghosts on this map? No, he doesn't have any ghosts, so it's going to be awfully difficult to get that nuke landed. But you can see that he's got the Ghost Academies. Yeah. What? No nukes in production, but maybe, I don't know, maybe he did build one. Anyway, let's have a quick look at the Army Supply tab. You can see Amy's managed to maintain a significant advantage there. Big worker supply advantage the other way around though. If you look at the Income tab, it's pretty skewed, but Biggles isn't doing the best job of actually spending. So it does need to get on top of that, Biggles. You need more production as well. I mean, you're cranking out Hellions, but at this stage of the game, I'm not sure what you're going to do with Hellions really. Hellbats, maybe I could see that, but not the most, perhaps not the best unit to be building. Hellions great in the earlier game. At this stage in the game, possibly of limited value. So these siege tanks that are parked here, with a reasonable raft of kills between them, are still the big problem here for Aimie. He's got this nice entrenched position out here. I'd like to see these siege tanks come even further forward and just really have pressure your opponent and have them penned in. If you do manage to set up a contain like this on your opponent, which Terran are well suited to doing, getting siege tanks up, etc., so that your opponent can't move out. To take full advantage of that, just expand all over the show, because you're keeping your opponent in his base. So he's doing, this is a nice move. This is the way to play this. You kind of come up the ramp and then you run, and what you're aiming to do is draw your opponent forward into your siege tanks range. So it can be a bit of a dance really. You want to stay out of your opponent's siege tanks fire. At the same time, you want to try and lure their units forward. This is risky. He's actually blocked the ramp here with these siege tanks, so he's going to have to be really careful here. His units are going to file past this one at a time, and that's not very pretty. He's probably got enough to push this position. When the siege tanks siege up, he needs to hit stim and just run his units forward to here so that he can get on top of these siege tanks. But it looks like he's just going to be able to muscle his way through. Notice that it's the Marauders that are left standing. Marauders are so tough that they can take siege tank fire to the face and not instantly die. And obviously other tanks pretty effective too. The only thing that's left here is the tanks though, and so now these Banshees are going to try and pick them off. What you can do here is just pick the tanks up into the medevacs. You can fit 2 tanks in a medevac, so you could pick up all of the tanks, and Banshees cannot shoot air. Now that you've cleaned out those, all of those siege tanks. Now you can get Marines in, and look how well Yuki's done here at building barracks to match his income. His minerals are nice and low. All in all, Yuki's not playing a bad game here at all. The minerals are staying low. He's got plenty of production. He's building Marines 9 at a time. So it really isn't going to take him long to get that army back together and push across the map again. Biggels, on the other hand, is still only building off half as many barracks. Yeah, with these players up on 3 bases, you can afford a lot of production. You can afford to be building certainly from 8 or 12 barracks, no problems. Okay, let's it looks like both players going to regroup. Biggels getting an expand over here on the far right. I'd have preferred this one. It's much closer to get to. This is a long walk, so perhaps he's basically hoping that his opponent won't find it. Looks like Aimie is perhaps setting up to move out again. I'd like to see more siege tanks in the production tab as well, and some more medevacs to assist with supporting all of these Marines that he is making. The other thing I think we're missing here in Aimie's base is upgrades. If I check the upgrades tab, we got combat shield and stim reasonably early, but there's no +1 attack, +1 armor. And arguably the same goes for Biggels. There is the +1 armor, but given that we're 16 minutes into the game now, really you should be at 3-3 by now. And those upgrades can make a fairly substantial difference to how your engagements are going to go. Alrighty. So a lot of siege tanks coming across here. Aimie's tried that frontal approach a couple of times, but look, there's no siege tanks actually defending this time. And in the absence of those siege tanks in defense, this force can actually push up here and have a strong chance of busting through. Because if these siege tanks are sieged up in a staggered way, then this stuff just can't move forward without getting obliterated. Hellions are not the best unit. I don't think he's got the blue flame upgrade. He doesn't. So, without that, they can do the splash damage, and there are a lot of them, to be fair. But without the blue frame upgrade, I don't think there's enough of them to quite one-shot these Marines. And with the medevacs here, the Marines will heal up again pretty quickly. That's just cheeky. So Aimie flying this base. I'm not sure why he's chosen to fly this one out and not this one, but anyway, and discovering that his opponent is trying to expand there, but that just will be so easy to kill. Okay, let's see some action here, guys. Biggels, you've done an awful lot of sitting about with these. That is a substantial number of so Aimie, you needed to get those tanks sieged up. Now they do siege up, they will level this force. So Biggels really needs to back off. He cannot walk into those tanks at all. Everything on the ground dying here really quickly. So Aimie doing the right type of thing, back and forth. Needs to use the stim button. Don't be shy about stimming your Marines, because a single stim, just stim forward. You can kill all of this stuff. You've got Marines. All he needs to do is hit T and A click, and these Banshees drop out of the sky phenomenally quickly. So at this stage, literally, Aimie just needs to A click for the win here. I just don't think he fully realizes how big an army advantage he has got at this time. Look how many Marines this is. That's a substantial number of Marines. He has 99 Marines on this map. He's very nearly maxed out. So he just needs to walk forward and win. There isn't a problem here. There we go, with the stim, and those Banshees just evaporate. The battle cruiser will similarly just disappear. I don't know why he's focusing on the factory. Just kill the stuff that's shooting you. This Thor is going to come down and achieve very little indeed. The battle cruiser flies across the Marines, and the DPS from the Marines just sees it off. So I don't think there's really anything left. 12 army supply for Biggels. So a pretty comprehensive win in the end of that game. Now, from Biggels' point of view, the previous pushes that came in, what kept them back for you was those siege tanks. But then when you lost the siege tanks, you didn't rebuild them. And had you rebuilt them, had you had 4 siege tanks in the ground in that last engagement, that engagement could have gone very differently indeed for you. But we live and learn. GG.